And the latest in terms of Omicron in India, we know now so far that 2 positive cases have been detected. Since then, there are more who have detected positive for COVID-19, but we still have to check whether they have the Omicron variant, and those tests are ongoing. Meanwhile, more and more people from at-risk countries coming in are being quarantined. The government says the test, track and trace protocol is being followed very, very closely. An important statement, though, made in Parliament today by the Health Minister Mansukh Mandaviya, who spoke about how so far we don't have any evidence that suggests that the current crop of vaccines will not work against Omicron. Listen in.
सवाल ये है जब बच्चों और बूस्टर डोज के संदर्भ में हमारे एक्सपर्ट टीम ही तय करेगी और जो भी मार्गदर्शन हमारे एक्सपर्ट और साइंटिफिक हमें मार्गदर्शन मिलेगा, ये साइंटिफिक मार्गदर्शन के आधार पर हम आगे चलेंगे। ये मेरा क्लियर पार्लियामेंट के फ्लोर पर रिप्लाई है।
The Omicron has got policymakers in a tizzy. Country after country is now imposing fresh travel restrictions and trying to figure out if the new variant of the COVID-19 virus originated maybe in South Africa or was already present in different parts of the world. What we do know so far about the Omicron is that it has double the mutations of the Delta variant. It spreads very fast, but we don't know if it has severe reactions, and vaccines, whether they will hold up or not, is the other big question. In the midst of this, as more and more information is unfolding, it's important to get perspective from the top experts around the world. And joining me for this today is Dr. Ashish Jha. He is Dean of the Brown University School of Public Health. Dr. Jha, thank you so much for speaking with us here at ET Now. Let me begin by your overview on the new variant. Of course, it's not surprising that there is a new variant, but the fact that it has advanced to this extent with all of these mutations, is that concerning to you?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me back on ET Now. You know, I look at Omicron variant and I think about the fact that we have seen many, many variants. Obviously, Delta, but beyond Delta, since Delta, we've seen Lambda and Mu. This one is different. And it's different not just because of the number of mutations, but where the mutations are particularly concerning. The spike protein of the virus, that's the part of the virus that attaches and infects human cells. That is where we're seeing a lot of the mutations. And the number of mutations and the location of the mutations has actually many of us concerned about both how easily is this virus going to spread, and then how well will our vaccines hold up? How well will previous infection protect people? These are questions we don't have good answers to yet, but that's what we're concerned about.
So right now, what the information that is coming in seems to suggest that it's not too bad, that all of the symptoms that we've seen don't seem to be very severe. That's at least what's coming in from medical experts in South Africa, where it was first detected. Do you think that that should assuage concerns, or is it too easy or too early to, think that it's not that bad?
It's too early, and let me explain why it is not surprising that the early reports suggested that. Often what we see with these kind of outbreaks and when we see with new viruses, they begin spreading in younger, healthy people first, travelers, other people who are active, and those people tend to have mild disease. And so the first few cases almost always are mild. The question is what happens when the virus spreads more broadly in society. We actually are starting to get some data from South Africa now. In the province where this has really become dominant, we're seeing a very large spike in hospitalizations. So I am not so convinced that this is going to turn out to be mild. Of course, we all hope it does, but the early data that I'm looking at actually makes me concerned that this will follow the same pattern in terms of severity of illness that prior variants of this virus did.
What about vaccines? There is so much conflicting information coming in. Some say that the current vaccines will hold. Today, the Indian Health Minister has said that the current vaccines will provide some protection, but we may see lesser efficacy. No one really knows. Then you have the vaccine makers who say that they're going to prepare new versions of their vaccines for this variant. Do we know right now that if you're vaccinated with 2 doses, are you safe?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The short answer is we don't know, but just because we don't know for sure doesn't mean we don't know anything. So let me tell you what I do think we know. If you are vaccinated with 2 doses, I am quite confident that you're going to have at least a good amount of protection. I don't know if it's going to be full protection. You may see some more breakthrough infections. But what we really care about most is preventing hospitalizations and deaths. And I think 2 doses will provide a good degree of protection against that. I'm not sure. None of us know for sure. We're going to get more data. But that's what we should expect. I think for high-risk people, certainly in many countries in the US, in Europe, Israel, we're talking about getting high-risk people boosters, that 3rd shot, especially if it's been, let's say, more than 6 months since their 2nd shot, which we think would provide even more protection. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to have much more clinical data and laboratory data that will actually tell us how much protection vaccines are providing. I think everybody should at least get their 2 shots. And I think if you're unvaccinated, this is going to be a very risky moment for people with Omicron. So getting vaccinated remains the best strategy.
So, in the Indian perspective, we have covered, say, with both doses, close to 50% of our population, adult population, we're vaccinating rapidly. But in terms of actual number of people unvaccinated, it is still pretty large. The thinking is that because our sero survey studies shows that maybe 2/3 of the population has been exposed to Delta, it shouldn't be too bad here in India. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that, but I want to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because we just don't know that much. I think if you've been previously infected, let's say 2/3 of Indians were previously infected with Delta, and then you add 2 doses of vaccines on top of that, you're going to have a very, very high degree of protection, including, I suspect, against Omicron. We don't know for sure, but I would be much more confident in a population that has had prior infections and at least 2 doses, that they should be able to weather this storm. Maybe we'll see a lot of breakthrough infections, but we should not be seeing a lot of hospitalizations and deaths in people who have had at least 2 shots.
Do you think there is a case to start booster shots in India as well? This is a big public health debate right now because the question is whether you cover everyone with 1 dose or you give booster doses to those who are more vulnerable, the elderly, the immunocompromised, etc. What is your view on this?
Yeah, it is a complicated debate. We obviously ultimately need to do both. We need to cover everybody at the same time. For elderly people, especially elderly people who have been, let's say, more than, certainly if they've been 6 months since their 2nd dose, which in India, there are not that many people yet who've been 6 months. So I think waiting a little bit of time is reasonable. What we see from vaccine data is that you tend to see a drop off in effectiveness after about 6 months. And so I think until that 6-month time period, continuing to vaccinate more and more people makes sense. But as elderly people get to that 6-month mark, giving a booster dose, I do think is going to be important. Obviously, elderly people are the people who are really at highest risk of bad outcomes. And so providing that extra protection for them will be very helpful.
The other public health debate truly is about travel restrictions. Now, South Africa feels it's being isolated and, very unfairly targeted for being transparent and revealing the presence of the Omicron. But on the other hand, this country after country either banning flights from some nations or, making those passengers go through extra rounds of restrictions. Do you think that's required?
Yeah, so first of all, let's talk about South Africa. I don't think any expert I know, and certainly I don't believe that this virus started, this variant Omicron started in South Africa. It almost surely started elsewhere. The issue is South Africa has very, very good surveillance. They identified it early, and then they have a terrific culture of being very open and transparent, and they let the world know. So if we punish South Africa, the signal to future countries is if you find a variant that's a problem, don't tell anybody because you're going to get punished. That's not the signal we want to be sending. That is not the signal we want to be sending. So I think travel bans against South Africa are a huge problem in terms of what it will cost us in the future. Now, I think travel, what we call border checks or travel restrictions that are much more targeted towards passengers, asking them to get tested, making sure that they're vaccinated, that's much more reasonable. And I don't think we should just be doing it in South Africa or Southern African countries. Any place we're seeing a large outbreak of Omicron, I think putting in those kinds of travel guards so that people who are coming in and out are getting tested, making sure they're vaccinated, that's a much more reasonable strategy. And I would certainly think that is something countries should pursue.
What about the question of, I wouldn't say punishing, but extra restrictions for those who choose not to get vaccinated? We're seeing that in Germany. We're seeing that in other European countries where those who choose not to get vaccinated are not allowed to do the same things. Do you think that's fair? That's necessary?
Yeah, I don't love punishing people. In public health, our general strategy has always been to try to persuade and bring people along. I understand the sentiment here, right? Because places like Germany, where 70% of the population is vaccinated, the 30% that's not is a major reason why they're seeing now a huge outbreak that's also affecting vaccinated people. So I understand this goal. I do think it's reasonable to have vaccine mandates in certain places. That's different than punishment. So saying if you want to fly, you have to be vaccinated. If you want to go to a public restaurant, you need to be vaccinated. Things like that, I think, cause kind of people to get vaccinated. I think punishing them, telling them they have to be locked down at home, that strikes me as a kind of draconian measure that as a public health person, I really just don't like. I don't know that it leads to long-term success.
Absolutely. These are treacherous waters. We're still trying to figure out our way through all of this. Thank you so much, Dr. Jha, for joining us today and shedding some light on the new Omicron variant.
Thank you.